Have you ever been so blindsided by someone's entitlement that you felt like you'd been hit by a freight train of audacity? That's how I felt the moment I hammered the last nail into a 6-foot-tall wooden fence, one that didn't just separate my yard from the lake. It split our entire community right down the shoreline like a knife through butter. Behind me, a crowd of stunned neighbors stood frozen. Across the fence, Margaret, the spoiled cousin of HOA Queen Karen, gawked in disbelief. Her private resort, jet ski ramp, and designer lounge chairs were now cut off behind a wall she never saw coming. This showdown didn't start overnight. It brewed over 5 years, beginning when I bought my dream home in Willowbrook Estates, lured in by the promise of deeded lakefront access. The beach and dock weren't just perks, they were sacred family ground. Every weekend was a lakefront ritual of fishing, swimming, and watching my kids laugh until sundown. That view was our peace. Our tradition. Our life. And then came Karen. 6 months ago, Karen Fitzgerald climbed her way to the top of the HOA, and in record time, transformed into the tyrant of tranquility. She ruled like she was crowned queen, issuing fines for petty things like grass height, banning wind chimes, apparently too noisy, and demanding written permission to plant anything not on her sacred list of approved flora. It was obnoxious, but tolerable. Then came the cronyism. Her brother-in-law somehow became the official landscape inspector. Her childhood friend magically landed the pool maintenance contract. And when her cousin Margaret rolled into town for a short visit, it didn't take long to see that HOA rules no longer applied to her. Margaret didn't just crash the community lakefront, she colonized it. This wasn't a lawn chair and a cooler. She brought out commercial-grade lounges, tiki torches, a stereo system that could drown out a jet engine, and she even began building a jet ski ramp. My once peaceful view became a frat party. I approached her calmly, tried to explain the lakefront was shared. Margaret didn't blink. She literally waved a paper in my face, claiming Karen had granted her exclusive rights to her half of the lakefront since I only used it on weekends. The arrogance was blinding. That easement reassignment she flashed claimed the HOA had unanimously voted to give Margaret exclusive access. Pretty bold, considering 2 board members were out of state at the time of the so-called vote. Something smelled rotten. I dug deeper, pulled city planning records and deed documents. And guess what? That lakefront. Legally deeded to my property. No HOA vote could touch it without my consent. Karen's little reassignment. Legally worthless, so I brought my findings to the next HOA meeting. Karen's response was pure circus. Her face turned crimson. She gripped the podium like it owed her rent. Then she screamed about recent bylaw amendments giving the HOA full waterfront control, complete with phantom votes and secret meetings no one remembered. She threatened $500 a day fines for anyone who dared defy her. Meanwhile, Margaret's shoreline resort kept expanding. The music got louder. The trash got worse. And then came the moment I'll never forget. My 8-year-old daughter tried to walk to the water for a swim and Margaret physically blocked her. Told her it was private property. Watching my little girl walk back with tears in her eyes was the last straw. I went full attorney mode. As a contracts lawyer, this was my wheelhouse. I tore through every document, purchase agreements, surveys, HOA charters, meeting transcripts, everything. The result? Bulletproof. Not only was the lakefront clearly deeded to my lot, but the HOA's own charter stated it had 0 jurisdiction over deed rights. Any interference? Grounds for personal liability. So I sent Karen and Margaret a formal notice, 72 hours to remove everything or face legal consequences. They laughed it off. The next morning, they showed up on my porch, Karen in full drama mode, Margaret in tow. With a guy who looked like he earned his law degree from reruns of Suits. They tried everything, threats, bribes, rambling nonsense. Karen offered to waive my HOA fees. Margaret suggested a shared schedule. Their lawyer brought up squatters' rights, earning him an eye roll and an invitation to leave. 72 hours passed. Nothing changed except Margaret started building a permanent shade pavilion. So I flipped the switch to phase 2. I hired a licensed surveyor to mark the exact boundaries of the deeded lakefront. Surprise, the lakefront split right down the middle, and Margaret's setup sprawled way over the line. Then I went shopping. A trip to the hardware store and several raised eyebrows later, I was hauling home enough fencing to make a statement. By the next morning, the whole neighborhood was whispering. When asked what I was doing, I simply said, just marking property lines. At dawn, my fence crew arrived. We had permits. We had paperwork. And we had a plan. The fence stretched from one end of the beach to the other, slicing through grass, dock, and even water with surgical precision. It was legal. It was poetic. Margaret emerged just in time to see her beloved lounge zone blocked off. Her coffee cup hit the ground in slow motion. Karen arrived in a bathrobe and foam curlers, trailed by half the neighborhood. Her screams were a cocktail of rage and confusion. She accused me of vandalism, harassment, emotional trauma, even identity theft. I wish I were kidding. She called the police. They reviewed my documentation. And left. She called code enforcement. They found 0 violations. She escalated all the way to City Hall, and who knows, maybe the UN. But Margaret's private paradise was now a punchline. Her jet ski ramp. Useless. Her stereo system. Split in half. The shade pavilion. Ridiculously straddling both sides of the fence like a sad stage prop. That evening, an emergency HOA meeting exploded. Karen had circulated flyers calling me a neighborhood menace, but it backfired hard. Turns out I wasn't the only one keeping receipts. Tom Harrison, a retired judge, stood up first and calmly laid out every violation Karen had committed. Then Sarah Chen, the one whose flower beds got bulldozed by Karen's landscaping crew, followed up with her own exposé. One by one, neighbors shared horror stories. Abuse of power. Financial misconduct. Backdoor deals. Then Margaret's husband walked in. He took one look at the chaos, the fence, the HOA meltdown, the mess his wife had made, and said they were leaving. As he dismantled their lakefront palace, neighbors overheard him muttering about how Karen had dragged them into a legal nightmare. Karen's last gasp came when she tried to issue an executive order to tear down the fence. That's when the HOA's own attorney finally stood up. He declared that Karen had overstepped her authority, opened the HOA to lawsuits, and needed to be removed. The vote? Unanimous. Karen was out, but it didn't stop there. The board voted to pursue charges. Turns out Karen had funneled HOA funds to fabricate Margaret's bogus easement paperwork and padded her brother-in-law's pay through inflated landscaping invoices. 3 months later, Karen was in court charged with fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Verdict? Guilty. Sentence: 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and $47,000 in restitution to the HOA. And me? I still drink my morning coffee by the lake, fence standing tall, peace restored. No stereo. No jet skis. Just the calm ripple of water and the occasional wave from a neighbor passing by. So yeah, build your fences wisely. And when HOA Karen comes for your property, show her where the line is. Literally. If that story gave you life, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. There's always another wild neighborhood tale just around the corner, and trust me, the next one's even crazier.